20 years later, the narrative of Bob Thornton and Angelina Jolie still seems incomplete. Their marriage had been loud, reckless, and unforgettable, but the way it ended left a silence that no one could explain. Bob remained silent for years, dodging questions and hiding behind jokes about his hotel lifestyle after each divorce. But time changes men. And recently he finally spoke about the truth he once fled from. And what he said about their breakup reveals a side to their marriage that the world never witnessed. Before Angelina Jolie changed the course of his life. Bob Thornton was a man already influenced by a lengthy history of broken relationships and emotional instability. He'd been married 4 times, each time leaving its own wounds and unresolved regrets by the time he met her on the set of Pushing Tin in 1999. He married his first wife, Melissa Lee Gatlin, in 1978 when he was a struggling young artist trying to make it in Hollywood. They had a daughter, Amanda, but the marriage lasted less than 2 years. Billy later said he was not a good partner back then. Amanda grew up alienated from him, burdened by insecurity, infidelity, and the pressure of trying to make a career out of nothing, which created wounds that would echo through his life. Next was actress Toni Lawrence. That marriage lasted just over 2 years from 1986 to 1988. Billy's career was still up and down and he spent much of his time hustling, staying up late, creating screenplays, and taking tiny parts wherever he could find them. That sort of milieu didn't give love much room to breathe. Then there was Williams, an actress who starred with him in One False Move. Their partnership was built on creative chemistry, not long-term compatibility. They divorced in 1992. Both subsequently stating they should never have married. His 4th marriage, to former Playboy model Petra Dawn Cherniak, was his most difficult. They married in 1993, had 2 sons and appeared to be steady on the surface, but by 1997 the marriage ended in a nasty divorce with claims of emotional and physical abuse. Billy refuted the charges, but the damage was done to his name, to the family, and to himself. Billy was a man by the late 90s who was afraid he wasn't made for marriage. His relationships were fast and hard and burned sorely. He would quip that every time he got divorced he went to hide in the Sunset Marquis Hotel. But beneath the humor there was a guilt, an insecurity, a feeling that love always slipped through his fingers. And then, there was Angelina Jolie. Young, fierce, unexpected, and then everything changed again with the arrival of Angelina. When Angelina Jolie showed up on the set of Pushing Tin in 1999, Bob Thornton was 44 years old, already weathered by life and engaged to actress Laura Dern. Angelina, 24, was brazen and had a reputation as Hollywood's wild child and a career on the rise that made her impossible to ignore. They weren't supposed to crash into each other. But they did. And the impact was immediate. Later, people who worked on the film said there was an electric shift when they were together, a chemistry that didn't build slowly, but exploded immediately. It was the kind of bond which didn't care for logic or timing. There was just one problem. Billy was not free. The romance between Billy and Angelina bloomed whilst Laura Dern was off filming. What followed became one of Hollywood's nastiest breakup stories. In May 2000, Billy married Angelina in Las Vegas, with no warning or discussion. Laura later told the news that she found out the same way everyone else did. "I left home to go work on a movie," she said. "And while I was gone, my boyfriend got married. I never heard from him again. It was abrupt. It was savage." It had cast a shadow over Billy and Angelina's new marriage from the very start. But once they were together, they were inseparable. They were always complimenting each other, staying close to each other, and acting like the world outside didn't exist. Angelina would go to him on sets just to get close to him. They weren't separated for more than a few hours. Their relationship was powerful, obsessive, and sometimes overwhelming. For them, and for everyone watching in public, the intensity appeared unstoppable. But in private something else was already taking shape. A tension between who they were and how they lived and the parts of themselves that neither had confronted. Yet their love glowed bright, almost too hot, and the heat would soon become unbearable for Billy to take. The controversy that followed. When Bob Thornton and Angelina Jolie said, "I do," the world stopped and stared. They weren't simply another Hollywood couple. They were a tempest. Whatever they did was a headline, and whatever the press wrote made their relationship seem stranger, darker, and more chaotic than it really was. Their public displays of affection were incessant and passionate. At awards presentations, on carpets and in interviews, they behaved as if they couldn't live without each other. For the fans, it was passionate. Critics said it was over the top. The media lapped it up. The most notorious rumor was born of something simple: necklaces of blood droplets from one to another. But it was just a little tiny finger prick inside a small locket. Something symbolic, almost childish in its simplicity. But when the tabloids got hold of the story, it became a horror story. Reporters strolled around with vials of blood hanging from their necks. Talk shows joked about them wearing buckets of blood. Billie subsequently stated it was a simple thing, but by the time the press got it, it sounded like we were wearing a bucket of blood around our necks. They were surprised by the speed with which a private gesture became a cultural punchline. And then there was the age disparity. Angelina was 24 and Billie was 44. 20 years apart. Hollywood has seen older men dating younger women, but this coupling was different since Angelina was not meek or naive. She was volatile, impetuous, emotionally complicated. Billie, on the other hand, was already worn out by life. Logically, they didn't seem right together, but emotionally they felt right. Their similarities drew them together, but their contrasts were starting to pull them apart. And Laura Dern stared down over everything. The world had not forgotten how quickly Billie had walked away from their engagement. That shadow followed him into his new marriage, adding another layer of controversy that neither he nor Angelina could be bothered to explain. They held their tongues, let the rumors tell the tale. But that stillness had also established a gap between them to the world, and ultimately to one another. The breakdown behind closed doors. By 2002, the cracks in Bob Thornton and Angelina Jolie's marriage were more than rumor. They were starting to become real, even if the public couldn't see them yet. What had been a passionate, all-consuming love was beginning to slow beneath the weight of who they really were. Angelina's life was speeding up. She was fast becoming one of the most photographed and talked about women on the planet, winning an Oscar, taking on big movies, and commencing humanitarian work overseas. Her world was expanding, fast, and she was accepting it wholeheartedly. Meanwhile, Billie was getting smaller and smaller. He had always been a shy, nervous man, a creature of small spaces and familiar routines in quiet corners. Sometimes he referred to himself as an agoraphobic, a person who loathed crowds and public attention. Angelina was alive on foreign missions and on red carpets, but Billie was overwhelmed, feeling like he was being dragged into a lifestyle that was never his. "I have an agoraphobic lifestyle and she leads a global lifestyle," he revealed later. It didn't come out bitter, simply honest. Then came a turning point neither of them could escape from. In March 2002, Angelina adopted her first child, Maddox. She was ready, emotionally, mentally, instinctively. She had become a mother, instantaneously. Billie was present for the adoption procedure and even flew to Cambodia with her. But when they got home, things had changed. He loved kids. He was not afraid of responsibility, but this moment came too fast, too soon, and when he was already struggling to keep up with her pace. What Angelina found easy, he found overpowering. Slowly they began to live different emotional lives. Angelina became a mother and international activist, and Billie retreated to his music, his writing, and the quiet comfort of being at home. He began to feel inadequate next to her popularity, her confidence, her rising role in the world. He once told me he felt not good enough for her, a seed of doubt that developed into distance. The couple was rarely seen together by the end of 2002. They didn't have a big bang or fight in public. Rather, their marriage ended the same way it began, quickly, quietly, and surprisingly. And when the divorce was finally formalized in May 2003, the public was still wondering what occurred. But the truth was far more tragic than anyone could have guessed. They were made for different lives, yet they loved each other very much. The actual reason, he said at last. For nearly 20 years, the world has been trying to understand why Bob Thornton and Angelina Jolie split up so swiftly. Some blamed the age difference. Others spoke of their whirlwind romance or the conflicts that became tabloid obsessions. But when Billy eventually admitted they were divorced, the truth was much more simple, and much more tragic, than the rumors. "We basically lived different lives," he added. Those 5 words were a perfect description of their marriage. Angelina was built for a life lived outward. She was fearless, restless, and set on making her mark beyond Hollywood. By her 20s, she was already going to war zones, adopting children and building a public identity that required frequent movement, visibility, and emotional courage. She loved new experiences, new challenges, new versions of herself. Billy was the opposite, a man ravaged by trauma, failed marriages, and lifelong anxiety. Only in stillness did he find comfort. He liked secluded places, the routines he knew, a world small enough to govern. He was overcome with fame. He got tired of big crowds. He wanted to hide from public life, even when he was successful. He'd often joke he'd go into hiding at the Sunset Marquis Hotel after every divorce. It was a good joke. It wasn't the truth of it. Angelina needed a partner who would stand beside her in the world. Billy needed someone to sit beside him in the silence. Those needs were not compatible even though they loved each other very much. And that's what Billy ultimately confessed. There was no scandal, no treachery, no startling violence. They just grew away from each other. In their marriage, the media made a huge deal about many things, but Billy had one thing clear. The love itself was true. "I think that was a terrific time," he said. "Angie is still my friend, and she's a wonderful person." He even defended her from years of public misperception, arguing their so-called wild marriage was far less scandalous than it was depicted, the famed blood necklaces. "They were little lockets," he said, "with a drop of blood in them, and that was it. It wasn't what transpired between them in the end that was the tragedy. It was all they could have asked for if they'd met at a different point in their lives." Life without Angelina and the peace he finally realized. Billy Bob Thornton disappeared off the radar for a spell after the divorce was finalized in 2003. Not dramatically, just silently. After his life was too loud, the way he always did. The world kept talking about Angelina, her expanding celebrity, her enlarging family, and the international work that would become her career hallmark. Billy took another road, a road that led him away from the cameras, the controversy, the chaos that once chased him. He returned to music, to the comfort of songwriting, and performing with his band, the Boxmasters. Music had always been his refuge, where his anxiety lessened and his thoughts became clear. He went on acting, but he gravitated more toward roles that offered depth without the constant attention that came with blockbuster fame. He didn't run for the fame. He already knew the cost of living inside it. Billy met Connie England shortly after his marriage to Angelina was over. Connie was a calm, down-to-earth woman who worked behind the scenes in the film industry. She wasn't a star, and never sought to be one. Her world was calm, steady, predictable, the very opposite of the whirlwind he'd just survived. For the first time, Billy felt he didn't have to perform. He did not have to live up to the pace of another, or measure up to the yoke of another's fame. With Connie, he could just be. The couple were dating for over 10 years until they married in 2014. They have a daughter, Bella, and they constructed a private life that suited him in a manner nothing had ever done before. He remarked once, "She's my speed." A simple sentence, yet one that showed all he had spent years attempting to uncover. Meanwhile, Angelina Jolie had moved on to a whole new chapter. Humanitarian work, mothering, directing, and raising 6 children. Their lives were so different that it was evident that their marriage never had a chance. They weren't suited to the same kind of life, but that didn't make what they had any less real. Even after all their years together, Billy still speaks of their marriage with warmth, not regret. Time didn't wash away the past. It just made it more tender. For him, it was real love. The memories were pleasant. And the ending, as painful as it was necessary for the two of them to become who they were meant to be. The real story behind their breakup is finally coming to light, 2 decades later. And it is much more human than the rumors ever suggested. Sometimes love is not enough for 2 people meant for different worlds. Now the question is yours. Yes. Do you believe Billy Bob Thornton and Angelina Jolie could have survived if they met at some other point in their lives? Tell us what you think in the comments below. And if you haven't done so already, like, subscribe and turn on the notifications so you never miss another Hollywood story.